Hi guys and welcome back here at 1000 PS. It's Supersport week. We have 12 bikes lined up for you, from small to big. Everything's included. But today it's about the CFMOTO 450 SR. And how does it perform? Is it good? Is it bad? Something in between. We're gonna find out for you, so stay tuned and find out. We're coming to my personal first impression of the CFMOTO 450 SRS. I have to say, as a woman, my primary view and look is on the handling. How does it operate in the slopes? How does it work for me personally? Because I'm not the heaviest person on earth. And I have to say that the handling of the CFMOTO is pretty good. As someone who also cares a lot about precision, I feel like this bike is really good for leaning. It was easy, it was comfortable, and I felt safe, which for me is, I think, the top-notch priority. And also, something that I didn't like too much is with the gas, that there's a lot of free room into both directions. So it's not really easy for dosing. It's really rough. And for me personally, that kind of contributed to the feeling of feeling a little unsafe and unstable. But it's really hard to say because those two things are equally as important and they're very contrary. So you for yourself have to decide what you think and what would be more important to you. But those are the two things that I have now looked at in my first rides.
So what are my first impressions of the CFMOTO 450 SRS? Well, the first thing that stood out to me was this fantastic digital, new, modern and high-quality display. I really liked that a lot. However, there are also things that I didn't like as much, especially in the first few moments. Specifically, I'd like to mention the throttle response when transitioning power, which was noticeable during gear shifts. It was quite difficult to manage the throttle comfortably on the tight turns of the Supermoto track. This led to some pop moments, which weren't particularly pleasant. Additionally, I noticed that the throttle in general has a long twist. It could be half as long, and it would still be great. What I mean by that is that it feels like less is more in this case. I hope that came across clearly. Another small detail is the rear brake. I enjoy using engine braking combined with the rear brake, and I noticed that it's not the most responsive. However, it's still fairly easy to use. Still, if I could, I'd probably want a bit more feedback from it. All in all, it performed really well otherwise, and I felt comfortable. The ergonomics were particularly pleasant.
The CFMOTO 450 SRS is actually a completely Chinese product, and that's why I have to say I was really surprised in a positive way. You usually don't have high expectations for products that come directly from China, although that's not really true anymore. We're being proven wrong more and more often, as it's not always associated with problems or poor quality. The CFMOTO is certainly no exception in this regard. It proves that things have been working well lately. The CFMOTO features a 450cc engine, a two-cylinder inline engine, which I must say works really well. It has a very broad range of usability. We have a wide usable rev range, and it runs smoothly, even just above idle speed, and then continuously adds power as the revs climb. The power itself is not bad at all either. With about 47 horsepower, it's quite well done for a 450 engine, which fits within the A2 class. You can also feel when riding it that it revs up really well without delay. The gearbox ratio is also well done. The gears aren't too short, which is often an issue in this smaller class where the ratios aren't always chosen optimally. However, that's not the case here. In fact, the gear ratios are well thought out. The first gear can reach speeds of 60 to 70 kilometers per hour, which is a reasonable range, especially if you want to ride on smaller tracks like Supermoto tracks without having to shift constantly. You can stay in gear a bit longer. Another thing worth mentioning is that the seating position is also very well designed. It's somewhat sporty, but not too extreme. You don't have an overly tiring riding position, so you can sit comfortably on the bike for a long time, yet still have plenty of room for body movement to control the bike in a sporty way over longer periods. The riding geometry is also well done. There's a certain stability built in, which allows us to get good feedback from the chassis even at higher speeds. You can gauge very well where the tire's grip limit is. And that brings us to the next point, the tires themselves. The bike comes with Chinese tires as standard, and I have to say they perform well. This was a bit of a surprise. I was glad we ran our tests on these tires, and they showed not only a good base grip, but also that their handling and neutrality were impressive without needing to correct or adjust much when leaning into corners. They hold the line well, and the damping is okay. So I have to say the tires were quite convincing. How they will perform over their lifespan remains to be seen. It's often the case that as tires age, after a year or so, their properties change a lot. That's certainly an interesting point to consider later on. But as a base, the tires perform quite well. As for the electronics, we also have a few features. We have ABS along with traction control, but I must say the traction control doesn't work as well as it could. If you want to ride quickly, you'll need to deactivate it, which thankfully is possible. To really get going, it's very conservative and starts kicking in even when you're just leaning into a turn, reducing engine power without much need. The interventions are quite abrupt and aggressive, which makes it clear that this system still has a lot of room for improvement. That's one of the criticisms of the bike. However, I should mention that in this power class, traction control isn't really necessary, so you can safely turn it off when you want to ride faster. The ABS function works quite well too. However, if you are braking hard and downshifting at the same time, the ABS can sometimes get out of sync and reduce braking power too much, which significantly lengthens the braking distance. But if you concentrate on keeping the bike steady and not introducing too much disturbance to the drivetrain when rolling or downshifting, the ABS works fine. However, if you deviate from that, you'll notice that the ABS opens up too early and increases braking distance. Another thing I forgot to mention is the throttle response, which is another negative aspect of the electronics. The issue is with the throttle mapping, which hasn't been fully refined. You can really feel a strong jolt when you open the throttle from a closed position, even though the engine doesn't have much power. This is typical of engines with a lot of low-end torque, but unfortunately this issue is present here too. Even though the engine runs smoothly, the throttle response is just too abrupt, especially in the lower gears like first and second. This is particularly noticeable when you're trying to get back on the throttle while leaning into a corner. The bike hesitates and then suddenly there's a jolt through the drivetrain which disrupts your line a bit. That's something CFMOTO could definitely improve. The electronics work, but they're not at their final stage yet, so there's still room for improvement.
That's all we've got about the CFMOTO today. Let us know if you agree, if you don't agree, why. Leave it down in the comment section, leave a like, leave a follow, and stay tuned.